There was a moment on July 4th, 2012, when physicists discovered something that had been hidden from humanity since the beginning of time, something that exists in every cubic centimeter of space, something that touches every particle in your body right now, something without which you could not exist, without which atoms could not form, without which the universe would be nothing but massless particles racing through empty space at the speed of light forever. They call it the God particle. Not because it is divine, not because it proves God exists, not because physicists are secretly religious. They call it the God particle because when a publisher read the manuscript of a book about this particle, he refused to print the title the physicist wanted. Leon Lederman, Nobel laureate who wrote the book, wanted to call it the goddamn particle because it was so difficult to find, so expensive to detect, so frustratingly elusive despite being everywhere. The publisher said no, too offensive, changed it to the God particle, and the name stuck. Now everyone calls it that. Scientists hate the name. Peter Higgs, the man who predicted its existence, despises the name, says it is misleading, sensationalist, and he is an atheist, which makes the irony perfect. The man who predicted the God particle does not believe in God, but the name persists because it captures something true even if unintended. This particle, or rather the field it represents, does what only gods were supposed to do. It gives substance to reality. It creates mass from massless energy. It transforms nothing into something. It makes matter possible. Without it, the universe would have no structure, no complexity, no life, no consciousness, no you asking why you exist. This is the Higgs boson, the God particle, and understanding what it is and what it does will change how you think about existence itself. Begin with the discovery. The 4th of July, 2012, CERN laboratory in Geneva, Switzerland, the Large Hadron Collider, the largest, most complex, most expensive scientific instrument ever built. A circular tunnel 27 kilometers in circumference, buried 100 meters underground, beneath the border of Switzerland and France. Inside this tunnel, protons are accelerated to 99.9999991% the speed of light, traveling in opposite directions. When they collide, the energy is so enormous, 13 trillion electron volts, that matter is created from pure energy. E equals mc squared running backwards, energy becoming mass. These collisions happen billions of times. The detectors surrounding the collision points ATLAS and CMS, massive instruments the size of apartment buildings containing millions of sensors, record what particles emerge from the collisions. Almost all collisions produce ordinary known particles, but physicists are looking for something rare, something that appears in only one collision out of billions, something that exists for only 10^-22 seconds before decaying into other particles, something predicted 48 years earlier but never observed, the Higgs boson. On that July morning, CERN held press conference. Scientists do not usually get emotional at press conferences. They are trained to be skeptical, reserved, cautious. But that morning was different. Peter Higgs attended. He was 83 years old, had predicted this particle in 1964 when he was young, physicist. Spent his entire career waiting for experimental confirmation. Now, nearly half a century later, the confirmation arrived. The Director General of CERN announced the discovery, 5 sigma significance. This means 99.99994% confidence. In particle physics, 5 sigma is the threshold for claiming discovery. Less than that is merely evidence. 5 sigma is proof. The Higgs boson exists, Peter Higgs cried. Physicists in the audience applauded, some cried. This was not just another discovery. This was the final piece of the Standard Model. The last particle predicted but undetected. The completion of 50 years of theoretical development. And more than that, This was discovery of why anything has mass, why matter exists, why the universe is not just energy and radiation but has substance and structure. This was answer to one of the deepest questions physics can ask. The cost was staggering. The Large Hadron Collider cost approximately $10 billion to build. Thousands of physicists from over 100 countries collaborated. Decades of planning. Engineering challenges that seemed impossible. Creating magnetic fields strong enough to bend protons traveling at nearly light speed requires superconducting magnets, cooled to 1.9 Kelvin colder than outer space. The energy for these collisions comes from massive electrical systems. The data processing requires computing power distributed across global networks. The entire project represents the pinnacle of human technological achievement, and it found a particle that exists for less time than it takes light to cross an atom. A particle so unstable it cannot be observed directly, only its decay products. Like archaeologists reconstructing dinosaurs from fossilized footprints, physicists reconstructed the Higgs boson from particles it decays into. This required trillions of collisions, years of data collection, statistical analysis of unprecedented complexity. But they found it. Mass 125.09 GeV, exactly in the range predicted. Properties matching theoretical expectations. The God particle was real. But what is it? The Higgs boson is not the important part. The boson is just the particle, the quantum excitation in the Higgs field. The field is what matters. Just as we discussed quantum fields in previous videos, the electron field that pervades all space, the photon field that mediates light, the Higgs field, is another quantum field filling the universe. But the Higgs field is special, unique among all fields, because the Higgs field does something no other field does. It gives mass to particles, not to itself initially, but to other particles. Electrons, quarks, W and Z bosons. All the particles that have mass receive that mass through interaction with the Higgs field. Without the Higgs field, these particles would be massless, would travel at light speed like photons, could not slow down, could not bind together, could not form atoms. The Higgs field is why matter exists as opposed to just energy. Here is how it works. Imagine empty space. Not empty in ordinary sense. We know from quantum mechanics that vacuum is not truly empty but empty of particles. In this vacuum, the Higgs field exists. It has non-zero value even in vacuum state. This is crucial and unusual. Most fields have zero value in vacuum. The electromagnetic field is zero when no photons are present. The electron field is zero when no electrons exist. But the Higgs field is not zero even in vacuum. It has what physicists call a vacuum expectation value. The value is 246 giga-electron volts GeV. This sounds technical, but the meaning is profound. The Higgs field is on throughout space, always, everywhere. It fills the universe with invisible presence that affects every particle passing through it. When a particle moves through space, it moves through the Higgs field. Particles that interact with the Higgs field experience resistance, like moving through molasses, or honey, or thick fluid that creates drag. The particle wants to move at light speed, that is the natural speed in relativity when nothing impedes motion, but the Higgs field impedes it, creates resistance. The particle slows down, and this resistance to acceleration is exactly what we call mass. Mass is not a substance, not an intrinsic property that particles just have. Mass is the resistance to acceleration created by interaction with the Higgs field. The stronger the interaction, the more resistance, the more mass. Electrons interact weakly with Higgs field. They have small mass, 0.511 MeV. Top quarks interact strongly with Higgs field. They have large mass, 173 GeV. The mass hierarchy of particles reflects the strength of their coupling to the Higgs field. This is profound insight. Mass is not fundamental property, mass is relationship. Interaction between particle and field. Some particles do not interact with Higgs field at all. Photons are most famous example. Photons do not couple to Higgs field, therefore photons are massless. They travel at light speed through space without experiencing any drag from Higgs field. The field is present, it is omnipresent, but photons do not feel it. Similarly, gluons are massless because they do not couple to Higgs. If gravitons exist, they are also massless. Only particles that couple to Higgs field gain mass. And the Standard Model specifies which particles couple and how strongly. This is not arbitrary. The coupling constants are measured experimental values that we do not yet understand from deeper theory. They are inputs to the Standard Model, given by nature. Why these values rather than others is open question. But the fact that particles gain mass through Higgs coupling is established. Now, consider when this happened. The Higgs field was not always on. In the first moments after the Big Bang, the universe was incredibly hot. Temperature exceeded 15 Kelvin. At such extreme temperatures, the Higgs field was in symmetric state. Its vacuum expectation value was 0. It was off. During this brief period lasting about 10-12 seconds, all particles were massless. Electrons, quarks, W and Z bosons, everything moved at light speed. The universe was plasma of massless particles and radiation. No atoms existed, no structure, just energy in various forms racing through expanding space. Then the universe cooled. When temperature dropped below critical threshold about 159, 5 GeV in energy units, the Higgs field underwent phase transition. Like water freezing into ice, the symmetric state became unstable. The field rolled into lower energy configuration, and in this new configuration, the vacuum expectation value was non-zero. The Higgs field turned on. Suddenly, throughout all of space, particles began interacting with the field, began experiencing resistance, began having mass. This moment is called Electroweak symmetry breaking, and it created the universe as we know it. Before symmetry breaking, electrons and quarks were massless. They could not form atoms because massless particles cannot bind. They move at light speed and cannot be captured. After symmetry breaking, electrons had mass. They could slow down, could be captured by electromagnetic force into atomic orbitals. Quarks had mass. They could bind through strong force into protons and neutrons, and protons and neutrons could form nuclei, and nuclei could capture electrons to form atoms, and atoms could form molecules, and molecules could form stars and planets and eventually life. All of this became possible in the instant the Higgs field turned on. This was true creation moment. Not the Big Bang itself that created space and energy, but the Higgs phase transition created matter, substance, structure. Everything solid traces back to that moment 10-12 seconds after Big Bang, when Higgs field activated and gave mass to the universe. This is why they call it God particle, not because it is literally divine, but because it performs function religions attribute to God. Creation, making something from nothing. Before Higgs field, particles were massless energy. After Higgs field, particles have mass and matter. The transformation is not gradual, it is sudden. Phase transition, like water becoming ice at freezing point. And it is universal. Every particle everywhere affected simultaneously. The field is omnipresent. Its activation created mass throughout the entire universe in single instant. This is cosmogonic moment. Genesis, the breath that transforms void into substance. The word that speaks matter into existence. Obviously, physicists do not mean this theologically, they mean it mechanically. The Higgs field is not conscious, not intentional, not designed. It is simply quantum field, following mathematical laws. But the functional parallel to theological creation is undeniable. The Higgs field creates mass where none existed, continuously, because the field remains on. Particles gain mass not once in the past but now. At every moment, Your mass right now is being generated by interaction with Higgs field that pervades your body. Remove the Higgs field and your mass vanishes instantly. You would become massless particles dissipating at light speed. The Higgs field sustains your existence continuously. Just as we discussed in previous videos how quantum fields sustain particles, the Higgs field sustains mass. It is creative power operating at every instant throughout all of space. Leon Lederman wanted to call it the goddamn particle because it was so hard to find. The Higgs boson is produced rarely, even in highest energy collisions. Its mass, 125 GeV, requires enormous collision energy, and once produced, it decays almost instantly into other particles. You cannot see Higgs boson directly. You see its decay products, photons, leptons, W bosons, Z bosons, and reconstruct from their properties that Higgs boson existed briefly before decaying. This is like detective work, finding fingerprints of something that no longer exists. The statistical analysis is staggering in complexity. Billions of collisions produce background noise, ordinary particles from ordinary processes. Buried in this noise are rare events where Higgs boson appeared momentarily. Distinguishing signal from noise requires years of data and sophisticated statistical methods. This is why it took 48 years from prediction to discovery, not because scientists were slow, but because the experiment is extraordinarily difficult. Requires technology that did not exist when Higgs predicted the boson, requires energies that could not be achieved, requires detection capabilities and computing power unavailable until 21st century. The discovery represents triumph of persistence. Physicists built the most complex machine ever constructed to find a particle that exists for less time than light takes to cross a proton, and they succeeded. Peter Higgs did not like the attention. He is a private person, quiet, prefers solitude to publicity, and he found the God particle name embarrassing. In interviews after the discovery, he repeatedly said the name is misleading, that it gives wrong impression, that people might think physicists found God, or disproved God, or made some theological claim. He insisted the Higgs boson is just a particle, a quantum excitation in a field, nothing mystical, nothing divine, just physics. And he is right. The Higgs boson does not prove God exists, does not disprove God exists. It explains mechanism by which mass arises. That is all. Mechanism is not theology. How is not who or why. Physics describes processes. Theology addresses meaning and purpose and agency. They are different domains. Finding Higgs boson tells us how mass is generated physically. It does not tell us why mass generation mechanism exists, why these coupling constants, why 246 GeV vacuum expectation value, why Higgs field rather than no Higgs field. These are deeper questions that physics currently cannot answer. Perhaps they have no answer. Perhaps they are brute facts about reality. Or perhaps they point to something beyond physics that chose or designed or necessitated these particular values and mechanisms. That is philosophical or theological question, not decided by experimental physics. But the name stuck anyway. Media loved it. God particle found. Made better headline than Higgs boson detected. The public could relate to God particle, could understand the significance even without understanding the physics, and there is something appropriate about the name despite its technical inaccuracy. Because the Higgs field does perform function that religions describe as divine. It is omnipresent, exists everywhere, simultaneously. It creates, generates mass continuously from massless energy. It sustains, maintains mass moment by moment through continuous interaction. It determines what is possible. Particles that couple to Higgs can have mass. Those that do not cannot. It existed before ordinary matter was present at the creation moment, before atoms formed. It is invisible, yet affects everything. It is foundation of material reality. These are attributes theology ascribes to divine presence, ground of being, sustaining power, creative force. Obviously, the Higgs field is not conscious, not intentional, not personal. But functionally, it does what only gods were supposed to do: make something from nothing, give substance to reality, hold physical existence in being. This is why the name resonates even though physicists resist it. The theological controversy was predictable. Some religious people saw the discovery as evidence for God. Look, they said, even physics admits there is creative force underlying reality, force that makes matter possible, that gives substance to existence. This is what theology always claimed, that reality requires foundation beyond itself. Some called Higgs field the mechanism through which God creates, the physical manifestation of divine creative power. If God wanted to create material universe, Higgs field would be excellent tool. Omnipresent, powerful, automatic. Set the field parameters and let physics do the rest. This is deist or semi-deist theology. God as designer of natural laws that then operate without constant intervention. The Higgs field reveals the elegance of divine design. How much complexity can emerge from simple mathematical rules properly chosen. This interpretation accepts the physics completely, while adding metaphysical layer, the claim that laws themselves require explanation, and that explanation is divine intelligence. Other religious people were less enthusiastic, worried that physics was replacing God, that natural explanations eliminate need for divine action. If mass comes from Higgs field, what role remains for God? This is old tension between science and faith. Every time science explains something previously mysterious, some believers feel God is being pushed out of the universe, pushed to margins, made unnecessary. The God of the gaps problem. If you place God in gaps of scientific knowledge, then when science fills those gaps, God shrinks. Higgs' discovery fills gap. We now know how mass arises. No miracle needed, no divine intervention required, just quantum field operating according to mathematical laws. For those who based faith on inexplicability of mass, the discovery was threatening. But most theologians reject God of the gaps strategy. God is not explanation for what we do not understand. God is ground of all being, including what we do understand. Scientific explanation of mechanism does not eliminate need for ultimate explanation of why anything exists at all. The Higgs field explains how mass arises, but it does not explain why Higgs field exists. Why these laws? Why this universe with these parameters? Those questions remain even after Higgs' discovery, and they are the questions theology addresses. So faith and physics need not conflict. They address different levels of explanation. Atheists had their own responses. Some saw Higgs' discovery as nail in coffin of religion. Look, they said, physics can explain creation without God, mass from Higgs field, universe from quantum fluctuation, complexity from natural selection, no gaps for God to fill. Everything can be explained naturalistically, and if everything has natural explanation, God is superfluous, unnecessary hypothesis. Occam's razor eliminates what is not needed. This is scientism, the belief that science provides complete explanation of reality, that all questions can in principle be answered by physics, that metaphysics is obsolete. Many scientists hold this view, not because science proves it, it is philosophical position, not scientific conclusion, but because they find naturalistic worldview sufficient and satisfying. They do not feel need for anything beyond physical laws and processes. For them, Higgs' discovery reinforces confidence that nature explains itself. No transcendent source required. But other atheists and agnostics were more nuanced. They acknowledged that physics explains mechanisms but not ultimate foundations. Why do these laws exist rather than others? Why does anything exist rather than nothing? Why is mathematics so effective at describing reality? These questions remain. Higgs' discovery does not answer them. Maybe they have no answer. Maybe existence is brute fact, requiring no explanation. Or maybe current physics is not final. Maybe deeper theory will explain Higgs field in terms of something more fundamental. String theory or quantum gravity might show Higgs is not truly elementary, might derive its properties from deeper structure, or might show that Higgs parameters are inevitable consequences of logical consistency or mathematical necessity. These possibilities keep physics open-ended, always reaching for deeper explanation, never claiming to have ultimate answer. And this humility about limits of knowledge is appropriate. Science has explained much, but much remains mysterious. And Higgs' discovery, while answering one question, raises others. Why this mass? Why this vacuum expectation value? Why this symmetry breaking pattern? Each answer generates new questions. This is progress, but not completion, not final understanding. Consider what mass actually is in this picture. We usually think mass is stuff, amount of matter, how much something weighs. But that is imprecise. Weight is force of gravity on mass. Mass itself is resistance to acceleration, inertia. How much force is required to change velocity? In Newtonian physics, mass is fundamental property that objects just have. But in modern physics informed by Higgs mechanism, mass is relational property. It is strength of interaction between particle and Higgs field. Mass is not intrinsic, it is extrinsic. It depends on field being present and field being in correct state. Before Electroweak symmetry breaking, same particles had no mass because field was in different state. After symmetry breaking, particles gained mass not because anything changed about particles themselves, but because field configuration changed. The particles are still the same quantum objects, same charges, same spin, same quantum numbers, but they acquired mass through new relationship with Higgs field. This is strange ontology. Your mass is not property of your atoms. Your mass is the fact that your atoms' constituent particles interact with field filling all space. Remove field and mass vanishes, not the particles, just their mass. They would still exist but would be massless, unable to form structures, unable to be what they are. This dependency is absolute. Moment by moment, mass is not possessed but continuously generated through ongoing interaction with omnipresent field. This is remarkably like theological descriptions of contingent being. Theology distinguishes necessary being from contingent being. Necessary being exists by its own nature, cannot not exist. God in classical theology is necessary being. Contingent beings exist through dependence on necessary being, do not have existence by their own nature, are held in being by something else. If sustaining power were withdrawn, contingent beings would cease, not gradually but instantly. They have no independent existence. This is exactly how particles relate to Higgs field. Particles do not have mass by their own nature. They have mass through continuous interaction with Higgs field. Remove field and mass, vanishes instantly. The relationship is one of absolute dependence. Contingent mass depending on necessary field. The parallel is precise, not proof of theology, but structural similarity suggesting that theological concepts of contingency and dependence might map onto physical realities we now understand through quantum field theory. The irony is delicious. Peter Higgs is atheist, does not believe in God, yet his name is attached to God particle. He predicted field that has divine-like properties, omnipresence, creative power, sustaining action. He did not intend theological implications. Was doing pure physics, solving problem in particle theory. Why do W and Z bosons have mass when photons do not? How can electroweak symmetry be broken? These are technical questions in quantum field theory. The Higgs mechanism answered them elegantly. That the mechanism involves omnipresent field creating mass was consequence of physics, not theology. Higgs was not thinking about God when he proposed the field. He was thinking about symmetries and gauge theories, and spontaneous symmetry breaking. The theological parallels emerged afterwards when people reflected on what the mechanism implies. That the man who gave us the God particle does not believe in God is fitting. It shows the discovery is not religious, not motivated by faith, not attempt to prove theology, just physics following its own logic to conclusion that happens to have profound implications for how we understand existence and creation and the foundations of material reality. We have explored why they call it God particle. The name is historical accident publishers' compromise, but it stuck because it captures something true. The Higgs field performs functions previously attributed only to divine beings, creates mass, sustains matter, pervades all space, determines what is possible. Without it, universe would have no structure. The discovery, after 48 years of searching, confirms theoretical prediction, validates standard model, explains origin of mass, but raises deeper questions. Why this field? Why these values? What made this mechanism rather than others? Physics describes how. Theology asks why and who. Both perspectives are valuable. Both address reality. Neither replaces the other because they operate at different levels of explanation. The God particle is not God, but it reveals something profound about the structure of existence, about how matter arises, about what sustains physical reality moment by moment, and understanding this mechanism changes how we think about ourselves and the universe we inhabit. We are not independent substances. We are patterns of energy interacting with fields, and our mass, our very substance, is continuously generated through interaction with omnipresent Higgs field that exists whether we acknowledge it or not. This is our foundation. This is what makes matter possible. This is the God particle. And in the next part, we will explore how it actually works, how symmetry breaking created mass, how particles couple to the field, how energy becomes matter through interaction with invisible presence filling all of space. This is the mechanism of creation, the physics of how something comes from nothing. Not theological nothing, but physical nothing. Massless energy becoming matter with substance and weight and structure through the creative action of quantum field that is always present, always active, always generating mass from pure energy, according to mathematical laws that we can describe, but do not yet fully understand at the deepest level of why these laws rather than others, and whether that question even has an answer, or whether we have reached the foundation beyond which no deeper explanation exists, and we must simply accept that this is how reality is structured at its most fundamental level, according to Higgs field, creating mass continuously throughout all space and time, making us possible, making matter possible, making the universe something rather than nothing, but empty energy racing through void, forever, at light speed, going nowhere, building nothing, just existing without form or substance or meaning until the Higgs field activated and said, "Let there be mass," and there was mass, and it was the foundation of everything that followed, including us wondering how we got here, and discovering finally, after half a century of searching, that the answer is the God particle, working continuously behind all appearances, generating the substance of reality from pure potential, through mechanisms so elegant it seems almost designed, which is why some see divinity in it, and others see only mathematics, but all can agree, it is remarkable, beautiful, profound truth about existence itself. There was a moment in the history of the universe that changed everything. Not the Big Bang itself, that created space and time and energy, but there was a second creation, a transformation so profound that without it, you would not exist. Stars would not exist. Atoms would not exist. Nothing solid would exist. This moment occurred 10^-12 seconds after the Big Bang, 1/1,000,000th of a second. In that instant, the universe underwent phase transition. The Higgs field, which had been zero throughout all space, suddenly acquired non-zero value. It turned on, and in that turning on, it gave mass to particles that had been massless since the beginning. Electrons that had been racing at light speeds suddenly slowed down. Quarks that had been unable to bind suddenly became massive enough to form protons and neutrons. The W and Z bosons that mediate weak force suddenly became hundreds of times heavier than before. This was not gradual process, not slow accumulation. It was instantaneous transformation throughout the entire universe simultaneously. One moment, all particles were massless. Next moment, particles had mass. This is called Electroweak symmetry breaking, and it is the moment matter became possible. Before this moment, the universe was energy. After this moment, the universe was matter. The Higgs field performed this transformation. Not once, not in the past, but continuously. Right now, at this instant, your mass is being generated by the Higgs field as you read this. Every electron in your atoms, every quark in your protons. They are interacting with the Higgs field, and that interaction creates their mass moment by moment without pause. Remove the Higgs field, and your mass vanishes instantly. Not your particles, just their mass. They would become massless and race away at light speed. You would cease to be matter, would become pure energy dissipating into space. This is how the God particle creates, not by building structures, but by giving substance to what would otherwise be insubstantial. By making energy behave like matter through continuous interaction with omnipresent field that never rests and never fails and never withdraws its creative power for even the smallest fraction of a second. Begin with the beginning. Immediately after the Big Bang, the universe was incredibly hot. Temperature exceeded 10-15 Kelvin. At such extreme temperatures, the Higgs field was in symmetric state. Think of a pencil balanced on its point. Perfectly symmetric. Looks the same from all directions, but unstable. The slightest disturbance makes it fall. When it falls, it breaks symmetry. Now it points in particular direction. No longer looks the same from all angles. The Higgs field at high temperature was like this balanced pencil, in symmetric state. But this state had higher energy than asymmetric state, so it was unstable, waiting to fall. As the universe expanded, it cooled. Temperature dropped, and when temperature fell below critical threshold, about 159.5 GeV in energy units, which corresponds to about 10-15 Kelvin, the symmetric state became absolutely unstable. The Higgs field could no longer remain balanced at zero. It fell, rolled down into lower energy configuration, and in this new configuration, the field had non-zero vacuum expectation value. The value is 246 GeV. This sounds technical, but the meaning is clear. The Higgs field, throughout all space, acquired definite value, was no longer zero, was turned on, active, present with measurable strength at every point in space. And this change happened everywhere simultaneously, because phase transitions in quantum fields occur throughout entire affected region at once when critical conditions are reached. Before the phase transition, particles were massless, all of them. Electrons had no mass, quarks had no mass, W and Z bosons had no mass. They all traveled at light speed, could not slow down, could not be captured, could not bind together. The universe was soup of radiation and massless particles, photons, gluons, massless electrons and quarks and weak bosons all racing through expanding space at the only speed possible for massless particles, the speed of light. There was no structure, no atoms, not because temperature was too high for atoms to survive, though that was also true, but more fundamentally because atoms were impossible. Electrons cannot orbit nuclei if electrons are massless. Massless particles do not experience electromagnetic attraction the way massive particles do. They cannot slow down to be captured, cannot form bound states. The physics simply does not allow atomic structure when electrons are massless. Similarly, protons and neutrons cannot form when quarks are massless. The strong force binds quarks into hadrons, but this binding requires quarks to have mass. Massless quarks at high energy cannot form stable composite particles. They remain free, unbound. And so the universe before Electroweak symmetry breaking was fundamentally different from universe after. not just hotter, but structurally incapable of producing matter as we know it. Then the phase transition occurred. The Higgs field value changed from 0 to 246 GeV throughout all space instantaneously, and particles that couple to the Higgs field suddenly began interacting with it. The interaction creates resistance to motion. This resistance is mass. Think of particles as swimmers. Before the phase transition, they were swimming through vacuum-empty space with no resistance. They could move at maximum light speed. After the phase transition, they were swimming through molasses. The Higgs field with non-zero value acts like thick fluid filling space. Particles moving through it experience drag. The drag slows them down, makes them resist acceleration, and this resistance is exactly what we mean by mass. The more strongly a particle couples to the Higgs field, the more drag it experiences, the more mass it has. Electrons couple weakly. They experience small drag. They have small mass, 0.511 MeV. Top quarks couple strongly. They experience enormous drag. They have huge mass, 173 GeV, which is 340,000 times heavier than electrons. The mass ratios between particles reflect differences in coupling strength to Higgs field. This is not arbitrary. The coupling constants are fundamental parameters of the Standard Model. They are measured experimentally, and they determine the mass hierarchy we observe. But some particles do not couple to Higgs field at all. Photons are most famous example. The photon does not interact with Higgs field. Therefore, photon remains massless even after symmetry breaking. Photons still travel at light speed, still experience no resistance. The Higgs field is present everywhere, including where photons propagate. But photons do not feel it. They pass through the field without interaction. Like certain materials pass through other materials without interacting, neutrinos passing through matter, for instance. The interaction depends on coupling. No coupling means no interaction even if both objects occupy same space. This is quantum field theory, subtlety. Fields can coexist without affecting each other unless specific coupling terms in the Lagrangian allow interaction. The photon has no such coupling to Higgs, neither does the gluon, so these particles remain massless forever. They are exceptions. Most particles of the Standard Model do couple to Higgs and therefore gained mass at symmetry breaking. But photons and gluons did not. They remain as they were at the beginning, massless, traveling at light speed, unaffected by the Higgs field that transformed everything else. Now visualize the phase transition geometrically. Physicists use a diagram called the Mexican hat potential. Imagine surface shaped like bottom of wine bottle or sombrero. In the center is a bump. Around the bump is a trough, a circular valley. The height of the surface represents energy. The horizontal dimensions represent possible values of the Higgs field. At high temperature, the lowest energy is at the center, the top of the bump. The Higgs field sits there, value is 0, symmetric. But this is unstable equilibrium, like a ball balanced on top of bump. As temperature drops, the energy landscape changes. The bump becomes inverted. Now the center is highest energy. The trough around it becomes lowest energy. The ball can no longer stay at center. It must roll down into the trough. But the trough is circular. The ball can roll in any direction. Whichever direction it chooses, it breaks the symmetry. Because now the field points in particular direction rather than being 0 at the center. This is spontaneous symmetry breaking. The laws, the shape of the potential are symmetric, but the outcome is not. The field chose one direction randomly, could have chosen differently. If it had, the universe would be identical, because what matters is not which direction, but the magnitude, the fact that field is non-zero. All directions in the trough give same vacuum expectation value, 246 GeV, so it does not matter which direction the field chose, but it had to choose one, could not remain at the center, and in choosing, it broke the symmetry and gave mass to particles. This raises profound question. Why 246 GeV? Why this particular value rather than some other value? If the vacuum expectation value had been different, all particle masses would be different. Everything would scale proportionally. The mass ratios might stay the same. Top quark still 340,000 times heavier than electron, but the absolute values would change. If vacuum expectation value were twice as large, all masses would be twice as large. Atoms would be heavier, chemistry would be different, nuclear physics would be different, perhaps life would be impossible. We do not know, but we do know that the value is what it is, 246 GeV, and we have no deeper explanation for why. It is measured parameter. Input to the theory, not derived from more fundamental principle. This is one of the mysteries. Why these particular values? The coupling constants that determine how strongly different particles interact with Higgs field. Why those values? The vacuum expectation value. Why 246 GeV? These are free parameters in the standard model. Measured, accepted, used to make predictions, but not explained. This is where physics currently reaches its limit. We can describe how the mechanism works, but not why the mechanism has these particular parameters. Some physicists hope deeper theory will explain. Perhaps string theory or quantum gravity will show that these parameters are not arbitrary, that they are determined by consistency conditions or mathematical necessity, that only these values allow stable universe or permit observer to exist. Anthropic reasoning. If parameters were very different, atoms could not form or stars could not burn or chemistry could not produce complexity, and we would not be here to measure anything. So perhaps we observe these values because only universes with these values produce observers. This is selection effect, not explanation. But it might be all we can get. Other universes in Multiverse might have different Higgs parameters. We are in universe compatible with our existence, cannot observe incompatible universes because they contain no observers. This is unsatisfying to physicists who want unique explanation, want to derive parameters from deeper principles, but maybe that is not possible. Maybe some things are just brute facts about reality. This universe has these parameters. That is how it is, and we exist because parameters allow us, not because they were chosen for us. Just because in vast ensemble of possibilities, this combination happened and we happen to inhabit it. But return to the creation moment, that instant 10, -12 seconds after Big Bang when Higgs field activated. Imagine you could witness it. Not possible, of course. You cannot exist before atoms form, but imagine you could observe. What would you see? One moment, particles of light and energy racing through space at light speed. Electrons, quarks, W bosons, Z bosons, all massless, moving maximally fast, unable to interact in ways that create structure. The next moment, these same particles suddenly moving slower. Electrons now massive, traveling slower than light, able to be captured by electromagnetic force. Quarks now massive, able to bind through strong force into composite particles. W and Z bosons now massive, about 80 and 91 GeV respectively, much heavier than before, and this heaviness changes how weak force operates, makes it short range. Because massive force carriers have limited range, the more massive, the shorter the range. This is why weak force is weak and short range, because after symmetry breaking, W and Z bosons became heavy. Before symmetry breaking, they were massless, like photons. Weak force would have been long range, but symmetry breaking gave them mass and confined weak force to nuclear distances. All of this happened instantaneously throughout the universe, not in one location spreading outward, but everywhere at once. Phase transitions in quantum fields are global. When critical conditions are met, the transition occurs throughout entire correlated regions simultaneously, and at 10-12 seconds after Big Bang, the entire observable universe was within correlated region. So the Higgs field activated everywhere at the same time. Every particle throughout space suddenly gained mass. This is cosmic creation event, not the only one. The Big Bang created space and time and energy. But this is the moment matter became possible, when substance emerged from energy, when particles acquired inertia and could slow down and bind together and form structures. Everything that followed, atoms, stars, galaxies, planets, life, consciousness, traces back to this moment. None of it could exist if the Higgs field had not turned on. We owe our existence to phase transition in quantum field occurring because universe cooled to critical temperature, allowing field to fall from unstable symmetric state into stable symmetry broken state with non-zero vacuum. Expectation value that has remained constant ever since. And this is crucial point. The Higgs field did not turn on once and then remain passively present. It is actively present, continuously interacting with particles. Your mass right now is being generated by interaction between particles in your body and Higgs field filling all space. This is not historical claim, not statement about past. This is present tense continuous action. The field is creating mass now. At this instant, if the Higgs field suddenly disappeared, if some cosmic fluctuation returned it to zero value, your mass would vanish. Instantly, not gradually, not after your body processed the loss. Instantly, because your mass is not property you possess. It is relationship you have with field. No field, no relationship, no mass. Your electrons would become massless and dissipate at light speed. Your quarks would unbind and race away. You would not die. You would cease to be structured matter, would become energy. This is absolute dependence, moment by moment, continuous. The Higgs field is not past cause whose effect persists. It is present cause whose effect requires continuous causing. Remove cause and effect vanishes. This is sustaining power. Creative action that must continue or creation collapses, not gradual decay, instant collapse. Because what is sustained is not independent thing with own existence. What is sustained is pattern of interaction with field. No field, no interaction, no pattern, no mass, no you. Some particles receive more mass than others. The electron is light 0.511 MeV. The muon, which is like heavier version of electron, has mass of 106 MeV. The tau, even heavier version, has mass of 1,777 MeV. These three particles are identical except for mass. Same charge, same spin, same quantum numbers, but different masses because they couple to Higgs field with different strengths. The coupling constants are different. We do not know why, just that they are. The quark sector is similar. Up quark is light, about 2.2 MeV. Down quark slightly heavier, about 4.7 MeV. Strange quark about 95 MeV. Charm quark about 1.3 GeV. Bottom quark about 4.2 GeV. Top quark about 173 GeV. The pattern shows enormous range. Top quark is 80,000 times heavier than up quark. Both are quarks. Both have similar properties, but vastly different masses because their coupling to Higgs field differs by factor of 80,000. We do not understand why nature chose these values. We measure them and use them, but deeper explanation eludes us. This is frontier of physics. Why these coupling constants? Why this mass hierarchy? What principle determines which particles are light and which are heavy? No answer yet. Just observation that the hierarchy exists and reflects Higgs coupling strengths. But here is surprising fact. The Higgs field gives mass to fundamental particles, but most mass in the universe does not come from Higgs field directly. Consider proton. The proton has mass of 938 MeV. It contains 2 up quarks and 1 down quark. The up quark mass is about 2.2 MeV each. The down quark mass is about 4.7 MeV. 2 ups plus 1 down equals about 9 MeV total. But the proton mass is 938 MeV. Where does the other 929 MeV come from? It is not from Higgs field, it is from binding energy. The strong force binds quarks together inside proton. This binding involves enormous energy. Gluons, mediating strong force, carry energy. The quarks are confined by strong force, cannot escape. This confinement energy is converted to mass through E = mc². About 99% of proton mass comes from strong force binding energy. Only 1% comes from the masses of the constituent quarks, which themselves come from Higgs coupling. So most of your mass, most of the mass of atoms in your body, is not directly from Higgs field. It is from binding energy of strong force holding quarks inside protons and neutrons. But the Higgs field is still essential, because without the Higgs field, the quarks would be massless, and massless quarks at the energies where protons exist cannot bind properly. The Higgs-generated quark mass is a small percentage of total proton mass, but they are necessary for protons to exist at all. The structure requires that quarks have mass, even small mass from Higgs coupling. So while most mass is binding energy, the Higgs mechanism is still the foundation because it creates the quark masses that allow binding to occur in the first place. This is subtle but important. The Higgs field does not generate all mass directly, but it enables mass generation, creates conditions where binding energy can convert to mass. Without Higgs field, particles would be massless. Binding energy would still exist, gluons would still mediate strong force, but the bound states would be different. Protons as we know them could not exist. Perhaps some other structures would form, perhaps not. The physics of massless quarks bound by strong force is not well understood because it is not the world we inhabit. We inhabit a world where Electroweak symmetry is broken and Higgs field is on and particles have mass. And in this world, the Higgs-generated quark masses, though small percentage of total mass, are necessary for matter as we know it. So the Higgs field is still creator of mass in essential sense, even though most mass numerically comes from binding energy that the Higgs-generated masses enable. Now consider continuous creation. Theologians debate whether God created once or creates continuously. Deists say once God made the universe and stepped back. Let natural laws run. Theists say continuously God sustains creation moment by moment. Remove God and creation collapses. The Higgs field is clearly continuous creation, not one-time event. The field is always on, always interacting with particles, always generating mass. Stop the interaction and mass vanishes. The field does not create and withdraw, it creates and sustains simultaneously. Every moment is creation moment. Your mass now is as much created as your mass 1 second ago or 1 year ago. The field does not fatigue, does not diminish, does not need replenishment. It simply is. And in being, it creates, automatically, necessarily, without choice or effort or expenditure. This is strange kind of causation, not temporal cause producing effect that then persists, but simultaneous cause and effect. The field's presence causes mass. Remove presence and effect vanishes. No temporal gap, no delay. Instantaneous dependence. This is how theologians describe divine sustaining. God's action is not in past creating effects that persist. God's action is now creating effects that exist only because action continues. Remove action and effects cease. The Higgs field operates identically. Its action is present, continuous, necessary for mass to exist. The mass is not independent effect that could persist without cause. Mass is the effect occurring because cause is occurring. Stop, cause, and effect stops, not after delay. Simultaneously. This is deep connection between physical mechanism and theological concept, both describing same kind of relationship, absolute dependence of effect on continuously operating cause. But why does Higgs field have vacuum expectation value? Why is it on rather than off? The answer is that the on state has lower energy than the off state at current temperature. The field naturally falls to lowest energy configuration, like water flows downhill, not because anything pushes it, but because that is where minimum potential energy is located. The Higgs field at 246 GeV is minimum energy configuration of the field given the shape of the potential at current temperatures. It is not zero because zero is higher energy. The field rolled away from zero into the trough, and it remains there because that is stable equilibrium. The ball at the bottom of Mexican hat potential does not roll out unless you add energy. Similarly, Higgs field does not return to zero unless universe reheats above critical temperature. As long as universe remains cool below 15 Kelvin, the field stays in symmetry broken state. And universe has been cooling for 13.8 billion years. It is not going to reheat, so the Higgs field will remain on effectively forever, creating mass throughout all space continuously until heat death of universe if heat death occurs. This is eternal sustaining, not in past, not just in future, but in eternal present, always now, always active, always creating mass from the interaction between particles and field. Some physicists wonder if there could be another phase transition in the future. Perhaps the current state is not the absolute minimum energy. Perhaps there is lower energy state the field could reach. If so, vacuum could be metastable, meaning stable but not absolutely stable, could decay to lower energy state through quantum tunneling. If this happened, a bubble of true vacuum would form somewhere in space. Inside the bubble, Higgs field would have different value, particle masses would be different, physics would be different, and the bubble would expand at light speed, converting false vacuum to true vacuum, changing the laws of physics in its wake. Everything in its path would be destroyed and reconstituted according to new physics. Atoms would unbind, new structures might form or might not depending on new Higgs value. This is vacuum decay scenario, hypothetical but possible. Physicists calculate that if it occurs, the timescale is enormous, much longer than current age of universe, so we are safe for unimaginable duration. But the possibility exists. The Higgs field we observe might not be final state, might be temporary valley on way to deeper valley. If true, current creation is provisional, waiting for deeper creation. But this is highly speculative. Current measurements suggest vacuum is stable. Higgs mass and top quark mass and other parameters indicate we are in stable region, not metastable, so vacuum decay is unlikely. Higgs field will probably remain at 246 GeV, creating mass as it has since -12 seconds after Big Bang, and will continue until end of time. The creation of mass is not dramatic, not something you observe happening. It is invisible, automatic, constant, like breathing. You do not notice breathing unless you think about it. Similarly, you do not notice Higgs field creating your mass unless you think about it, but it is happening, right now. The electrons in the atoms of your eyes are interacting with Higgs field. The interaction gives them mass, allows them to orbit nuclei, allows atoms to exist, allows chemistry to work, allows molecules to form, allows life to emerge. All because Higgs field is on and coupling to particles and creating resistance that manifests as mass. This is foundation, hidden, omnipresent, essential. Remove it, and everything collapses. Not into chaos, into non-existence of structure. Particles would still exist, but they would be massless and unable to form anything complex. Universe would return to state it had before symmetry breaking. Energy without substance, motion without structure, potential without actualization. This is what Higgs field prevents. By being on, by having non-zero value, by interacting with particles continuously. It holds reality in the structured state. Prevents collapse back into structureless energy soup. This is sustaining power. This is continuous creation. This is what the God particle does every moment of every day throughout all of space, creating mass, enabling matter, making universe real rather than merely energetic. This is its function. This is why physicists sought it for 48 years. Because without understanding this mechanism, we could not understand why anything has mass, why matter exists, why the universe is not just light and massless particles racing through void forever. Now we understand. The Higgs field creates mass continuously from the interaction between field and particles. Not once, always. This is the answer. This is how God particle creates, not by building, but by giving weight to what would otherwise be weightless, by making substantial what would otherwise be insubstantial, by continuous action that never ceases and never fails and never requires attention or effort, but simply is the nature of quantum field existing at non-zero value, interacting with particles that couple to it according to coupling. Constants we measure but do not yet understand from deeper principles, but accept as features of reality as currently structured, awaiting perhaps deeper theory that will explain why these values, or perhaps accepting that some features of reality are brute facts, requiring no further explanation because they are foundation beyond which no D per foundation exists, and we are simply fortunate that the foundation permits our existence, allows matter to form, allows complexity to emerge, allows consciousness to arise and contemplate these questions about how mass is created, and discover that the answer is quantum field, continuously interacting with particles in ways described precisely by mathematics of standard model, confirmed by experiments at CERN when they found the God particle, and thereby confirmed that we understand how mass is generated, even if we do not yet understand why this particular mechanism with these particular parameters rather than some other mechanism with other parameters. But knowing how is already profound achievement, showing that human minds can understand fundamental processes of reality through careful reasoning and experimental test, revealing that nature operates according to elegant mathematical principles and that we are capable of discovering those principles through persistence and ingenuity and enormous investment of resources and time, culminating in discovery that explains what previously was mysterious and opens new questions about deeper structure while answering ancient question of why anything has substance. There is a question that haunted physicists from the moment they discovered the Higgs boson, a question that goes beyond physics into metaphysics, beyond mechanism into meaning. The Higgs field explains how particles gain mass, describes the mechanism precisely. Mathematical equations specify how strongly each particle couples to the field. Experimental measurements confirm the predictions. The mechanism works, but mechanism is not ultimate explanation. Knowing how something works does not explain why it works that way rather than some other way. Why does the Higgs field exist at all? Why does it have vacuum expectation value of 246 GeV rather than some other value? Why do different particles couple to it with wildly different strengths? Top quark, 80,000 times stronger than up quark. Why these numbers? Why these parameters? Why this mechanism? Physics describes what happens, but cannot, at least currently, cannot explain why this particular configuration of reality rather than infinite other possibilities. And here the question becomes whether you need explanation beyond physics, whether the parameters point to something that chose them, designed them, set them precisely for purpose, or whether they are brute facts, accidents, contingent features of reality that could have been otherwise and happen to be what they are for no deeper reason than that some configuration had to occur. And this is the one that did. This is where God particle meets God question. Not because Higgs field proves God exists, not because it disproves God, but because it raises the question science cannot answer. Why these parameters? And whether why is even meaningful question, or whether we have reached the foundation where questions stop, and we must simply accept reality as given without further explanation, available or possible. Begin with what physicists call the hierarchy problem, or the naturalness problem. The Higgs boson mass is 125 GeV. This was measured at CERN in 2012, confirmed with high precision. But this value creates puzzle. In quantum field theory, particle masses receive corrections from virtual particles. Quantum fluctuations create and annihilate particles continuously. These virtual particles interact with Higgs field, and these interactions should add enormous corrections to Higgs mass. The calculations show that corrections should be approximately 16 GeV. That is 10 quadrillion GeV. The Planck scale, the energy where quantum effects and gravity become equally important, is about 19 GeV. Virtual particles up to Planck scale should contribute to Higgs mass, and the contribution should be huge. But the observed Higgs mass is only 125 GeV. This means the bare mass of the Higgs, the mass before corrections, must be negative and enormous, about -16 GeV, so that when you add the positive corrections from virtual particles, they almost exactly cancel, leaving only 125 GeV. This requires cancellation to 1 part in 10, 14, incredible precision, fine-tuning of astonishing magnitude, like balancing a pencil on its point to accuracy of 1 atom. Why would nature fine-tune parameters to this extreme degree? This seems unnatural, arbitrary, suspiciously precise, and physicists call this the hierarchy problem. Why is Higgs mass so much smaller than Planck mass? Why is weak scale characterized by Higgs vacuum expectation value of 246 GeV, so much smaller than Planck scale of 19 GeV? The ratio is 10:17, enormous hierarchy. And maintaining this hierarchy requires fine-tuned cancellation of quantum corrections. Some physicists thought supersymmetry would solve this. Supersymmetry predicts partner particles for every standard model particle. Fermions get boson partners, bosons get fermion partners. And remarkably, the quantum corrections from supersymmetric particles are exactly opposite in sign to corrections from standard model particles. They cancel automatically. No fine-tuning needed. The cancellation is consequence of symmetry. This is elegant solution, but supersymmetry has not been observed. The Large Hadron Collider has searched for supersymmetric particles extensively. None found. If they exist, they must be heavier than several TeV. But the heavier they are, the less they help with hierarchy problem, because heavy supersymmetric particles contribute less to cancelling corrections. So supersymmetry might still exist, but if it does not solve hierarchy problem as elegantly as hoped. The fine-tuning remains, perhaps reduced somewhat, but not eliminated. This is disappointing. Physicists hoped elegant theory would explain why Higgs mass is what it is. Instead, we have unexplained fine-tuning. Parameters balanced incredibly precisely for reasons unknown. This raises anthropic question. Perhaps parameters are not explained by deeper physics. Perhaps they are environmental. In multiverse scenario, eternal inflation creating infinite bubble universes. Each bubble has different parameters, different Higgs masses, different coupling constants, different vacuum expectation values. Most bubbles do not allow structure. If Higgs mass were much larger, Electroweak symmetry might not break, or might break at wrong energy. Particles would have wrong masses for atoms to form or stars to burn. If Higgs mass were much smaller, different problems arise. Perhaps protons decay, perhaps weak force is too strong. Countless ways for physics to be incompatible with complex structures. Only tiny fraction of parameter space allows galaxies and stars and planets and chemistry and life. We necessarily find ourselves in bubble with parameters compatible with observers. Because incompatible bubbles contain no observers to find anything, this is anthropic principle, not explanation of why parameters have values, but explanation of why we observe these values rather than others. Selection effect. We cannot observe universes where we do not exist. so our observations are biased toward life-compatible parameters, regardless of how rare such parameters are in full ensemble of possibilities. Some physicists find this satisfying, others hate it. Those who accept anthropic reasoning say it is only answer to certain fine-tuning problems. If parameters are not derived from deeper principles, if they are contingent environmental features varying across multiverse, then anthropic selection is legitimate explanation for why we observe special values. We observe them because we must, because only special values allow us to exist. This does not make values less mysterious, but it removes expectation that they should be derivable from fundamental theory. They are accidents, fortunate accidents from our perspective, but accidents nonetheless, not designed, not necessary, just lucky. And in infinite multiverse, every possible accident happens somewhere. We happen to be in a region where the accident permits our existence. Other regions exist with different accidents, but no observers there to be puzzled by them. This view removes purpose from parameters. They are not set for life. They just happen to allow life in rare instances. And we are in rare instance, not because we are special, but because only rare instances can ask the question. Other physicists reject anthropic reasoning, say it is giving up, abandoning search for deeper explanation. If you accept anthropic principle, you stop looking for theory that derives parameters. You accept they are arbitrary. But history of physics shows that what seems arbitrary often has deeper explanation. Newton's gravitational constant seemed arbitrary. Einstein showed it relates to space-time curvature. Particle masses seemed arbitrary. Higgs' mechanism explains them as coupling strengths. Why should we assume fine-tuning has no explanation? Perhaps deeper theory will emerge. Perhaps string theory or quantum gravity will show that parameters must be what they are. That they are constrained by consistency. That only these values permit stable universe or avoid contradictions. Then fine-tuning would be explained, not as design, not as accident, but as necessity. This is what many physicists hope for. They want theory that explains why parameters have the values they do. Theory with no free parameters, or very few. Everything else derived. This would be beautiful, elegant, final explanation. But we do not have such theory yet, and it might not exist. We might have reached level where some things are brute facts, contingent features that simply are what they are. This is unsettling, but might be true. Now introduce theological perspective. Religious believers see fine-tuning differently. To them, it is evidence of design. The parameters are not accidents. They are chosen, set deliberately by intelligent agent for purpose. The Higgs mechanism is tool, God's tool, the way God chose to create matter. Could have been different mechanism, but God chose this one. Set parameters precisely, fine-tune them to incredible accuracy. Why? To allow life, to allow consciousness, to allow beings who could know God and be in relationship with God. The fine-tuning is not problem, it is solution, not mystery requiring explanation, but evidence of intention. The universe is not accident, it is artifact, created deliberately with purpose, and the precision of parameters shows the care and intelligence involved. Like finding watch on beach, you do not assume it assembled randomly, you infer designer. Similarly, finding universe with precisely tuned parameters suggests designer, not proof, but inference to best explanation. Random chance is possible but improbable. Design is simpler explanation. Occam's razor favors it, or so the argument goes. Many scientists reject this reasoning. Point out that design hypothesis is not testable, cannot be falsified, does not make predictions. If you find fine-tuning, you say designer did it. If you find no fine-tuning, you say designer made elegant, simple universe. Every outcome confirms design hypothesis. This makes it useless scientifically, not because it is necessarily false, but because it cannot be tested. Science requires testable hypotheses. Design hypothesis is metaphysical claim, not scientific theory. So while it might be true, it is not science. And scientists, qua scientists, cannot invoke it. They must seek naturalistic explanations. Multiverse is naturalistic. Anthropic selection is naturalistic. Deeper physics deriving parameters is naturalistic. Design is supernatural, outside science's domain. This does not prove design is wrong, just that it is not scientific explanation. Theology can invoke design. Philosophy can debate design. But physics cannot use design as explanation because design makes no mathematical predictions and cannot be empirically tested. This is boundary of science, not boundary of truth, but boundary of method. Science operates within natural causes. Design invokes supernatural cause. Different domains, different rules. Both might be true, but only one is scientific. The irony is that Peter Higgs is atheist. The man whose name is attached to God particle does not believe in God. In interviews after the discovery, he said he is not religious, does not believe in supernatural, finds no need for God hypothesis to explain existence. The universe operates according to natural laws. Those laws are sufficient. Adding God adds nothing, explains nothing additional. So Occam's razor eliminates God as unnecessary. This is standard atheist position, not claiming to prove God does not exist, but seeing no reason to believe God exists. No evidence requiring supernatural explanation. Everything explained naturalistically, or if not yet explained, plausibly explainable by future science. Gaps in knowledge are not evidence for God. They are opportunities for research. Eventually, physics will explain what currently puzzles us, or we will accept some things as brute facts. Either way, no need to invoke deity. The universe is self-sufficient, self-explanatory within its own terms. God is superfluous hypothesis. This is Higgs's view, yet he predicted the God particle, mechanism that gives mass to everything, creates matter continuously, sustains existence, performs functions religions attribute to God. But for Higgs, these are just physics, natural processes. No divinity involved, just fields and particles and interactions described by mathematics. Elegant, beautiful, true, but not evidence of designer. Evidence of natural law, of how reality is structured at fundamental level. And that structure needs no creator, exists by its own nature. Or if it requires explanation, the explanation is physics, not theology. Leon Lederman, who coined the term God particle, or wanted to call it goddamn particle, was Jewish, but not religiously observant, more culturally Jewish. And his use of God was not theological, was expression of frustration. The particle was so important, so fundamental, so difficult to find that it seemed to hide deliberately, like God hiding from seekers, always just beyond reach, tantalizing, essential yet elusive. The name was meant ironically, not as claim about divinity, but as comment on how central and frustrating the search was. Publishers changed it to God particle because it sounded better, sold more books, generated more interest, and the name stuck despite physicists' objections. Now everyone calls it God particle. Even people who understand it has nothing to do with God theologically. It is just name, historical artifact, not theological claim, but it creates confusion, makes people think physics found God, or disproved God, or made some metaphysical discovery beyond physics, none of which is true. The Higgs boson is physics, just physics, important physics, beautiful physics, but physics nonetheless. Not theology, not metaphysics, physics describing mechanism by which mass arises. That is all, and it is enough. Explains what needed explaining, completes standard model, confirms theoretical predictions from 1964. shows that human minds can understand deep features of reality. This is the achievement, not finding God, but finding how mass works, which is profound enough without adding religious significance. But some religious thinkers saw the discovery as confirming their worldview. The Pope at the time, Pope Francis, said the discovery shows the deep rationality of creation. That universe operates according to elegant mathematical laws, and these laws reveal the mind of God, God as mathematician, as cosmic designer who expresses will through mathematical structure. The Higgs mechanism is how God chose to create, not miracle, but natural law, which is itself expression of divine will. This is classical theological view. God creates through natural causes, not against nature but through nature. Natural laws are God's tools, ways God operates consistently, predictably. So that universe is orderly rather than chaotic, and discovering natural laws is discovering God's mind, understanding how God creates. This view is compatible with science, accepts physics completely, adds metaphysical layer claim that laws themselves require explanation, and that explanation is divine intelligence. Physics describes how. Theology identifies who and why, both needed for complete understanding, not competing, complementary. Two perspectives on single reality, both valid, both necessary. Science for mechanism, theology for meaning. Liberal Protestant theologians said similar things. God is not separate from nature, but works through nature. The Higgs field is divine presence in material world. The omnipresent ground we discussed in previous videos, God's immanence. Not pantheism where God equals nature, but panentheism where God is in nature while transcending it. The Higgs field as physical manifestation of spiritual reality, not identical but connected. Physics describing material side, theology describing spiritual side, same reality from different angles. This allows both Higgs mechanism and divine action, not contradictory, integrated. God creates through Higgs mechanism, sets parameters, establishes laws, then lets physics operate. Not absentee God, but God working through natural processes rather than against them. Continuous creation we discussed is God's continuous action. Sustaining is divine sustaining, all expressed through physical mechanisms that science describes accurately. This theology respects science, accepts physics, but sees physics as incomplete, describing how, but not why, not addressing meaning or purpose or agency. Those require theology. Together, science and theology provide fuller picture than either alone. But what does Higgs' discovery not explain? Crucially, it does not explain consciousness. Your ability to read these words and understand them, your subjective experience. The qualia of seeing color or feeling pain. Higgs' mechanism explains why electrons have mass, why atoms can form, why chemistry works, but not why some arrangements of atoms become conscious. The hard problem of consciousness remains untouched by Higgs' discovery. Also, Higgs does not explain why laws exist. It describes one law, how mass generation works, but not why this law rather than others. Why laws at all? Why mathematical structure underlies reality? Why nature is comprehensible to mathematics? These are deep questions beyond physics. Perhaps philosophy addresses them. Perhaps they have no answer. But physics, including Higgs' mechanism, does not answer them. Also, Higgs does not explain why universe exists, why something rather than nothing. The Higgs mechanism operates within existing universe, requires space, time, energy, quantum fields, does not explain why any of that exists. Creation, ex nihilo, is not addressed. Origin of existence itself remains mystery. Higgs explains how mass arises within existing cosmos, not why cosmos exists. That question stands untouched by the discovery. Moreover, deeper mysteries remain in physics itself. Why does Higgs field exist? Is it fundamental or composite? String theory suggests all fields are vibrations of strings. If true, Higgs is not fundamental, is emergent from deeper string dynamics, then question becomes, why strings? What are strings made of? Is there infinite regress, or is there fundamental level that cannot be reduced further? We do not know. The Higgs discovery does not answer this. It reveals mechanism at one level, but deeper levels might exist, with their own mechanisms and mysteries. Also, why these coupling constants? Why top quark couples 80,000 times stronger than up quark? Is this accident or consequence of deeper theory? Nobody knows. The standard model takes couplings as inputs, measures them, uses them, but does not explain them. Future theory might derive them from deeper principles, or might show they are environmental different in different universes, or might reveal they are mathematical necessities, or might conclude they are brute facts, currently unknown. The discovery of Higgs does not resolve this, just confirms that mechanism works as predicted, but leaves open question of why mechanism has the parameters it has. There is also question of vacuum stability. Is the Higgs field in absolute minimum energy state, or could there be lower state? Calculations suggest universe is near boundary between stability and metastability. With current measurements, Higgs mass 125 GeV, top quark mass 173 GeV, the vacuum appears stable, but uncertainties remain. If parameters are slightly different from measured values, vacuum could be metastable, could decay to lower energy state through quantum tunneling. If this happens, bubble of true vacuum forms, expands at light speed, converts our vacuum to different vacuum with different physics. Everything destroyed. New structures might form or might not. This is called vacuum decay. Timescale, if it occurs, is longer than age of universe by many orders of magnitude. So we are safe for unimaginable duration. But possibility exists. Theoretically, we might be living in metastable universe, false vacuum that will eventually decay. The Higgs discovery refines calculations, but does not eliminate concern. We are probably stable, but not certainly. Small chance our universe is temporary, awaiting transition to true vacuum. This is unsettling thought, but probability is low, and timescale is vast. So not practical concern, but theoretical possibility that adds mystery to existence. Two interpretations of Higgs discovery are possible. Materialist interpretation says Higgs field is ultimate explanation for mass. No God needed, no designer, no purpose, just natural process. Field exists, has certain properties, particles couple to it, mass results. This is sufficient explanation. Why does field exist? No answer needed. Or answer is just because, brute fact. Or perhaps deeper physics will explain. But even if not, no need to invoke supernatural. Universe simply is how it is. Parameters are what they are. Perhaps for anthropic reasons if multiverse exists. Perhaps for no reason at all if only one universe. Either way, naturalistic explanation complete within its domain. God is unnecessary addition. Occam's razor eliminates unnecessary entities. So atheism or agnosticism is reasonable position given the science. Not proven, but simpler hypothesis. Fits data without adding unverifiable metaphysical claims. This is respectable philosophical position, not demonstrably true, but logically coherent, scientifically adequate, metaphysically minimalist. Theist interpretation says Higgs field is God's tool, mechanism through which divine will operates. The parameters are not accidents, they are choices. God chose this mechanism, set parameters for purpose. The fine-tuning points to intelligence. The elegance points to aesthetic sense. The life-permitting values point to intention. None of this is proof, but it is inference to best explanation. Like archaeologist inferring human agency from artifacts, or detective inferring criminal from evidence. The universe looks designed, Higgs mechanism is part of design, extremely clever design, automated, self-sustaining, requires no intervention once established. Set parameters correctly, and everything follows naturally. This is mark of excellent design, not clumsy tinkering, but elegant, simple rules generating enormous complexity. And the fact that parameters are fine-tuned to permit observers suggests purpose, not necessity, not accident, but intention. God wanted conscious beings, set parameters to allow them. Higgs mechanism is part of that intentional structure. This interpretation accepts all the physics, adds theological layer about meaning and source, not competing with science, operating at different level. Both can be true. Physics describing mechanism, theology identifying agent and purpose behind mechanism. Which interpretation is correct? Science cannot decide. Both accept same physics. Both acknowledge Higgs mechanism works as described. They differ only on metaphysical questions beyond empirical test. Is there God or not? Is universe designed or accidental? These are philosophical questions, not scientific ones. Evidence can inform them. Fine-tuning is relevant. Comprehensibility of mathematics is relevant. Existence of consciousness is relevant. But none of these prove or disprove God definitively. They are consistent with both theism and atheism. Each person must judge based on totality of considerations, philosophical arguments, religious experience, intuitions about meaning and purpose, aesthetic sense about whether universe seems designed, personal history and cultural background. All these factors influence belief, but physics itself remains neutral, describes how universe operates, does not determine who, if anyone, operates it, does not establish whether operation is intentional or automatic. These are questions physics leaves open, properly so, because they are not physics questions. They are metaphysics questions, and metaphysics begins where physics ends, at the boundary between mechanism and meaning, between how and why, between process and purpose. The discovery of the God particle is genuinely profound achievement. 48 years from prediction to confirmation, $10 billion invested, thousands of scientists collaborating, most complex machine ever built operating flawlessly for years, mountains of data analyzed, signal extracted from noise, and result confirms theoretical prediction with extraordinary precision. The Higgs boson exists, mass 125 GeV, properties matching expectations. This validates standard model, confirms our understanding of how mass arises, shows that human reasoning about invisible realities is reliable when properly constrained by mathematics and experiment. We predicted particle existed, based on theoretical consistency, built machine to find it, and found it. This is triumph of human intellect, of curiosity driving us to understand nature deeply, of persistence in face of difficulty and expense, of cooperation across nations and cultures, of science as method for discovering truth about physical reality. This is what the discovery means scientifically. It is enough. We need not add theological claims to appreciate significance. The science itself is profound. But theological questions remain. They always remain, because science explains how, never why. Why these laws? Why these parameters? Why this universe? Why anything? These questions persist regardless of scientific progress. They are a different kind of question, not about mechanism but about meaning, not about process but about purpose, not about cause within universe but about cause of universe. Science cannot answer because its method confines it to natural causes, to measurable phenomena, to testable hypotheses. Questions about ultimate reality lie outside this domain, not because they are unimportant, but because they require different methods. Philosophy, theology, contemplation, experience. These access different dimensions of truth, not contradicting science, but addressing questions science does not address. And the Higgs discovery, while answering scientific question, does not touch theological questions, does not make God more or less probable, does not confirm or refute design, simply reveals mechanism by which mass arises, leaving open whether mechanism is designed or accidental, intentional or automatic, meaningful or meaningless. These are decisions each person makes based on considerations beyond physics, and both decisions are legitimate, both consistent with science, both held by reasonable people. Atheists and theists can both accept Higgs' mechanism, can both appreciate its elegance, can both marvel at its implications. They differ only on whether elegance implies designer, whether fine-tuning suggests intention, whether mechanism points beyond itself to source. These are matters of interpretation, not of fact, and honest people disagree, not because one side understands physics better, but because they weigh metaphysical considerations differently. So does God particle replace God? No. It replaces ignorance about mass mechanism with knowledge. But it does not address God question, does not make God unnecessary if you believed God necessary before, does not make God necessary if you found God unnecessary before. It is neutral, like all science, describing what is, not who or why. That remains open. Does God particle reveal God? For those inclined to see God in nature, yes. It reveals mechanism they interpret as tool of creation. For those not so inclined, no. It reveals only natural process. Same physics. Different interpretations, both valid within their domains, neither proven, neither refuted. This is final answer. Higgs' mechanism explains how mass arises, does not explain why this mechanism. Why these parameters? Why anything? Those questions remain for philosophy and theology to address, as they always have and always will, because they are not physics questions. No matter how much physics we learn, we can understand mechanism completely and still ask why mechanism exists. Can map every law and still wonder why these laws. Can know everything about how and still not know why. This is limit of physics, not of knowledge, but of method. Physics answers certain questions brilliantly. Other questions require other approaches, and the discovery of God particle does not change this, does not merge physics and metaphysics, does not resolve science and religion debates, just adds to our understanding of how mass works, while leaving untouched deeper questions about why anything works at all, and whether working requires worker or happens automatically, without intention or purpose, beyond the bare fact of existing and following mathematical rules that we discover but do not choose and cannot change, but only describe with increasing precision and wonder at their elegance and power to generate complexity from simplicity, matter from energy, consciousness from matter, and questions about existence from consciousness, that discovered the mechanism that makes its own existence possible through the God particle, generating mass from nothing continuously throughout all space and time, making us real, making matter substantial, making universe more than abstract mathematical possibility. By actualizing that possibility through physical process, we now understand mechanically, even if we do not understand, ultimately leaving us with knowledge of how and continued mystery of why, which is perhaps exactly where we should be humble about what we know, confident about what we can learn, and open to possibility, ties beyond what physics alone can determine, recognizing both power and limits of scientific method and value, of multiple perspectives on single, mysterious, profound, beautiful existence that we briefly inhabit and struggle to comprehend. Finding answers that generate new questions in endless cycle of discovery that enriches without completing, understanding that deepens without reaching bottom, illuminates without eliminating mystery, which is perhaps the most honest position we can take, given what we know and what we cannot know about the God particle, and whether it replaces reveals, or simply describes mechanisms that exist with or without theological interpretation. Both views legitimate, both honest, both respecting science while differing on metaphysics, as reasonable people can and should when approaching questions that transcend empirical test and enter domains where evidence informs but does not determine conclusions, where reason guides but does not compel agreement, where truth is sought but not fully found, because some questions have no final answers, only better and worse ways of thinking about them, which is where the discovery of God particle leaves us, knowing more about how universe works, but not whether universe has meaning beyond the mechanisms that constitute it, leaving that question open, as it should be for honest inquiry, from multiple perspectives, all seeking truth in their own ways, all contributing to fuller, if never complete, understanding of reality.